What distinguishes the rational basis of happiness from how other people use the word happiness or make happiness a goal incorrectly?
Well, I think that people just go by feelings. They say, I want to feel happy. And that leaves out the fact that you end up with unanalyzed feelings as your guide. And unanalyzed feelings can still feel delicious, but you don't get the data from them. So you need to do what you were talking about earlier. You need to introspect and ask yourself, what do I love? What would make me happy in the main areas of my life? Career, romantic partner, family and friends. And you only need family who are friends. You can keep boundaries between those who are not too friendly. And you want to be very selective with family. And your hobbies and interests.
Welcome to the TalentGrow Show, where you can get actionable, results-oriented insight and advice on how to take your leadership, communication, and people skills to the next level and become the kind of leader people want to follow. And now, your host and leadership development strategist, Halelly Azulay.
Welcome back, Talent Growers. So glad that you're here for another episode of the Talent Grow Show. I'm Halelly Azulay, your leadership development strategist here at Talent Grow. And this week on the podcast, I have a licensed clinical psychologist and a radio host. This is Dr. Ellen Kenner. She is going to share with you a story about a mean boss and what to do in that case. She's going to help you think about, are you in the right career, and ways to right the wrong if you're not, with a great story that she shares about her son, which then leads me to share a story about my own early career mischoice, perhaps, where I would not be doing any of this if I had followed my early career aspirations, as I probably should have. But hey, here we are. We also talk about how to be happy in a rational kind of way. So I really, really look forward to you checking out this interview with Dr. Ellen Kenner on the Talent Grow Show. Here we go. Talent Growers, this week my guest is Dr. Ellen Kenner. She's a licensed clinical psychologist. She received her BA from Brown University and her PhD from the University of Rhode Island. She's a host of the syndicated radio show, The Rational Basis of Happiness. In 2018, this show began its 21st year, which is so amazing to me, and is heard on stations coast to coast. She has interviewed many prominent authors and has appeared as a guest on radio and television. She and Dr. Edwin Locke co-authored The Selfish Path to Romance, How to Love with Passion and Reason, a guide for finding and nurturing romance, inspired by the ideas of Ayn Rand. And if that name sounded familiar, Dr. Edwin Locke was my guest on episode 95. So you heard in there a couple of keywords like romance, which will not really be our foremost topic today, but happiness, which is always very interesting to most people in a professional career. Ellen, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you.
And I didn't ask you this, but is it okay for me to address you as Ellen, or should I call you Dr. Kenner?
Oh, no, absolutely, Ellen.
Okay, great. I'm really glad that you took the time to join us today. And before we start to think about how listeners can become happier, have better workplace relationships, thinking about their career and lots of other topics related to that, we always ask our guests to give us a brief description of their professional journey. Where did you start and how did you end up where you are today?
Oh, I started, as a child, I wanted to be in the theater, dancing and singing in Broadway musicals. And then I loved the French language and wanted to be a French interpreter. Wow. And I went to biology and started in French, but I realized that it was incredibly boring. This is at Brown University, incredibly boring there. And I realized that it wasn't French itself that I fell in love with, even though I loved the language. It was the content. My high school French teacher was having us read philosophers, and the questions that they raised was so fascinating. So from there at Brown, I actually veered off a little bit and got my degree in biology. And I worked in a lab where we were studying regeneration of different tissues. And then I veered again. This is a circuitous course.
Wow.
And I worked at a child research laboratory at Brown University. I was working in the hospital with day-old newborns and 6-month-olds, all the way up to 6-month-olds. And then I said, I know my dad's always wanted me to work in his business. Even if he doesn't directly say anything, I feel pressure. I should give it a shot. So I went into handbags design and making patterns for handbags. And I knew I didn't belong there. But I didn't know how to extricate myself, because if it's a family business, you feel some obligation and some respect for your parents. And had I not read 2 books that really turned my life around, and you could probably guess what they are, but The Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand. And at reading them, I realized I had never clearly identified what I wanted to do, and I had never given myself permission to formulate it clearly and to think that I could pursue it. So that's how I turned my thoughts to psychology. And the dramatic change that I saw in myself was amazing. So I know I'm talking about this a lot. I don't know if I'll pause for a minute. Just I can tell you where I went from there, but that was my early history.
I'm very inspired and pretty amazed by it, because it sounds like it was covering so many different topics and so many different areas. It's amazing. Like, I'd like to do a whole show just on this now.
Right. Well, it was very circuitous, but when I found out what I loved, I studied harder than I have had ever studied in my life. And I was a very good student for my graduate record exams because I wasn't a good test taker. I ended up doing phenomenally well on them. And then I set realistic expectations. I wanted to go back to grad school to get my PhD. And I told myself, it's okay to get rejected 5 years in a row because I'm coming in as an older student and because it's just difficult to get into the program I wanted, a PhD program. I did get in my second year. The first year I didn't, and I called up, asked them what could I do differently for next year. So just by having that mindset of 5 years, I gave myself 5 years to get in. Instead of feeling rejected, it was just, what could I do differently? And they said I needed experience. So I got experience. I worked in a psychiatric hospital, a very good one in Rhode Island. And I got tremendous experience and ended up getting accepted. And actually, the day I got my interview, my very young daughter was in the kitchen with me, and I was so elated. I was jumping up and down and carrying her and dancing around the room. So the achievement of a very hard value is so rewarding. Then I'll fast forward it. Then I went, got my PhD, and then I taught it at the college level, 2 different colleges. I taught psychology and at conferences. And then my husband helped me start a radio show. And fast forward, I wrote a book with Dr. Ed Locke on romance, How to Love with Passion and Reason. So that's a very quick tour through my life.
I know it's always a challenge when you come to a seasoned person and ask them to encapsulate their entire career into a short story, but especially when you've had so many, varied kind of waymarks along the way.
Exactly. Yes.
Well, it also is, personally, I think it's inspiring and helpful to people to hear that there is not from point A to point B, and if you've done something different, there's something wrong. I love so many elements in your story that show that, you introspect when you come to a certain part in your journey, and you introspect and you say, well, how does this feel to me? And is it satisfying? And am I accomplishing what I set out to accomplish? Is it using my strengths? And what else could I do? Or how could I do this differently? And then you just set goals and go for it. So it's never too late, and you can always pivot to a different place.
Right. That's exactly right.
So I know that in your radio show, you have a feature where people can call in and ask questions. And I looked at the amazing list. Goodness me, 21 years is just incredible. So you've had all kinds of topics and all kinds of questions. And talent growers know that our show is very focused on things that they can use as they're growing their own leadership and workplace success and career success skills. So for us, it'll be a little bit challenging to narrow down from that broad expertise that you've built. But I know that lots of times busy and successful professionals reach out to you and ask questions and seek your help on things that relate to challenges that they have in their workplace communication, in their workplace relationships, dealing with conflict, building trust, and so forth. What are some of the biggest challenges that you've seen people name that they experience in the workplace?
I think they chose wrong. I think that they didn't know how to allow themselves to enjoy a career, so they stayed with a career they didn't like. So that's one category. And I would say that's the biggest, that they feel locked in, they can't change. There are others, there are anger management issues from both sides. I've had clients who've come in and they know that they're too controlling. And to their credit, usually people who are controlling don't seek therapy. They think they're right. They think the other people are always to blame.
Right.
But, they would learn anger management issues and really respecting the autonomy of others, not trying to micromanage everybody. Another problem that I've seen is coworker issues. Coworker issues can range from envy. I actually worked with a coworker who was not envious of me, but she was envious of the people that worked directly under her. She terrorized them, and that was very difficult. And they were clueless. They didn't know what hit them. They unfortunately suffered a lot of self-doubt and unearned guilt because of her.
Wow. To recency effect, but let's focus on that one because it sounds terrible and intriguing at the same time. So what did you suggest to her, or what did she end up doing to fix it?
Well, she wasn't a client. That example was someone that when I worked at the infant lab, actually, we worked with infants, and we would have young college students who were very bright. The Brown University students come in as research assistants, and all they had to do was to hold a nipple in a baby's mouth for a half hour. And time again, I worked there for 3 years, so I would see her rotate through the different people, and she goes, they don't know how to hold the nipple. She would take small little things and just pick on them, and they did know how to hold the nipple. There was nothing wrong with it. She just would attack them, but she was not educated. I think she was very envious. She was a mean woman. She had used laughter as a weapon, mocking people rather than as a joy to celebrate some fun thing. And she was mean. And when I finally had the courage, this was before I myself had a lot of self-confidence. When I finally had the courage, I spoke to my boss, the professor that hired me, about her. And he says, I always suspected that, but it was too little too late for the people who had been abused by her. But having an abusive boss is something that, people have come to see me for too. And sometimes it's abusive just verbally. Sometimes they want to cross the line and have a sexual relationship, and that's, how you need to hold your distance there. So those are some of the issues.
So I know that you can't give us the entire therapy session that you probably do with those folks, but what are some of, maybe one or two of the suggestions you would give to someone who feels like their boss is abusive?
I think they first need a lot of self-empathy. They need to see that it's not fair, that other people in their life who they value treat them very well. And if their boss is unfair, they need to name exactly what the boss is doing, because it helps them anchor the way that the boss is hurting them. Like maybe the boss is making threats, or they're laughing at them, or they're giving them contradictory instructions, or they're expecting way too much of them, maybe way too much of their time. They expect them to work on weekends when the boss knows they have a family and they didn't sign up for working on weekends. Or the boss taking credit for something that they did. So they can name those things. And then if they have assertiveness skills, they can't go up to the boss and use what's called finger pointing language, you always, you never, finger pointing and global. Always and never. If someone said to me, Ellen, you always, you can fill in the blank. Even if they said you're, even if it's a positive, if, you always do everything right, it's insincere. It doesn't fit. I think of the times when I didn't do everything right. So if they can name what it is, they can go up to the boss and say, they can say what they noticed. For example, I noticed you told me to come in on weekends. I recall telling you that that's not feasible with my family situation. Let me know how we can work with this so my weekends are free. Do you need someone else? You might give some suggestions, or just let the boss give you some suggestions at that point. But you can face them with it rather than just gritting your teeth and going in on the weekend and hating your boss, hating your job, and just being really frustrated around your kids and feeling guilty around your kids because you weren't with them. So, and if they're giving you contradictory information, you can just name it to them. You told me that project A is your top priority, and then you came in and said B is your top priority. What would you give me some guidance? What would you like me to work on first? And if they say both, I want them both done in the next hour, it's like, that's not possible. Could you help me? I want to focus on what your priority is. So you try to work with them. You give them the benefit of the doubt at first. But if they're chronically this way, what would you suggest? If this is your boss and they're chronically manipulating you or picking on you or abusive, what would you suggest?
That's not my situation, but I totally agree that you should try to speak to the person. Like a lot of times they're not aware or they could fix it. But if they're unwilling to change once you've tried talking to them, and if you've given it your best shot, then I would say the next choice is you have to change your situation. You're not an indentured slave.
Absolutely. Right. You can choose the situation you enter. So you can either go to human resources and see if you could transfer to a different area in your workplace. If that's not feasible, start the process of looking for a new job, a new career, or see what your networking is like. Maybe you could, other people in the same career that could give you a new job.
That's right. Because life is way too short to be miserable or to be abused by
anyone. You want to recognize this is not working and I need to cut my losses.
I want to give real quick attention to the other two topics that you mentioned too. So you said the most common one was wrong career. And this is something actually I just recently also had Dr. Steve Orma on the show. And he also is, a psychologist like you. I think actually you had him on your show as well. So he talks a little bit about how people can change career, but what do you typically suggest to people who feel stuck? Because I know I talk to people who feel like they've got the golden handcuffs on, they've got a mortgage, they have other responsibilities. And so how could I just throw it all to the wind and try something where I'm going to go back to the bottom of the totem pole in some new career track and make a small amount of money, or I'm going to start a business and I might not make any money. So it seems impossible. So they just stay put and miserable.
Right. So you do have to take everything into context. If you have a mortgage and you have a family, that factors in, and you may need to stay at the current job while you're planning an exit strategy, further on down the line. But sometimes I would love to tell the example of my son, who went to school and wanted to be an architect initially, and then got into civil engineering, and then shifted to management engineering. And he found he was very good in management engineering. He could set up businesses from soup to nuts on the computer and integrate everything. And so he tried that career. And what he was noticing, he's a very gregarious, fun-loving kid. And as a management engineer, he got a very good job. He got the whole golden handcuffs for a company that was paying well. He could rise in the company and make an excellent living. All the trimmings were there. And he discovered that it was very lonely, that he's not that type of a person, and he would be sent to Winnipeg, Canada, or around the United States to set up businesses and integrate them. And even though he was very good at it, it wasn't within his personality. It didn't fit. So on weekends, he would come home and he would dance. He ballroom dancing just as a hobby. And then he started entering competitions, and he got a wonderful mentor or coach And he kept winning with her. She was actually asked to be on Dancing with the Stars second season as a professional.
Oh.
And she had said no. She said one of the worst mistakes of her life. But my son kept winning with her. And at one point, one weekend, she took it after one comp after they won, she took him aside and said, "I'm not going to teach you anymore." And he said, "Why?" She said, "Because I can take you to the top, but I can't do it if you're working all week long. And you have a choice to make, a career choice." And she just laid it out there on the line. And within 10 minutes, he decided to give up his career and to go into dance as a professional. And, initially as an amateur, and then he got an opportunity with one of his other hobbies to become a professional photographer for dance competitions. And now he travels all over. Tonight they're dancing in Manhattan, but they travel all over the country, both photographing dancers and competing themselves. He and his wife, he met his wife through dance too. So he was in a wrong career. And he had the courage to make the change.
Oh my God, it's amazing. And of course, this show is not about me and my personal life, but I have to say, this is like so eerie because my chosen profession if you would have asked me when I was a teenager, what do I want to be? I wanted to be a professional ballroom dancer.
Oh, did you really?
Yes. I spent all my time dancing, teaching, competing in ballroom. And I chose not to pursue it, in part because it didn't seem like a practical approach. And my father said, you have a smart brain. You should go into something that allows you to use that. And this is not a viable career. And I just sort of never tried. And I always have had this nagging regret that I wish I could. It's a youth-oriented career, so kind of.
Well, it depends. Yeah. My son is doing photography, right?
Yeah.
That's his, and he's very well respected in the field. We love his photographs. But he grew his business from nothing. So, sometimes I always wanted to be, I didn't mention this earlier, but when I was very young, I wanted to be an Olympic ice skating champion, figure skating. I love that. And now, at the age of 14, I knew my life was over. I think the Olympics came around then, and I just realized I had lost all my opportunity to ever be an Olympic ice skating champion. I did figure skating. I enjoyed it very much. But when I transferred that to ballroom dance, my husband and I ballroom dance, although I think our son influenced us more than we influenced him. So I think that you can if you love the dance, you can bring it back into your life. I don't know if you do now as a hobby or in some other capacity, to waken it up again and see if you still have that interest.
Yes. And I have kept dancing as a hobby for all the years, although not consistently. And so I don't currently have dance in my life, and I need to put it back in, I'm pretty sure, but not as a profession though. I missed that boat. But that's a great story, and I do appreciate you sharing it. And now I'm going to have to go and marinate on that some more and see if there's any.
Right, I love that. Yeah.
Well, the time is ticking, so I want to make sure that we get to. Should we go with anger management or should we go with happiness? I don't know.
Oh, I think happiness. Happiness.
Let's do it. Leave anger to the other folks. All right. So you chose the name, The Rational Basis for Happiness for your show. And so
right.
I personally I think I know what you mean by that, but I don't know if that's definitely not an accidental choice of words. What distinguishes the rational basis of happiness from how other people use the word happiness or make happiness a goal incorrectly?
Well, I think that people just go by feelings. They say, I want to feel happy. And that leaves out the fact that you end up with unanalyzed feelings as your guide. And unanalyzed feelings can still feel delicious, but you don't get the data from them. So you need to do what you were talking about earlier. You need to introspect and ask yourself, what do I love? What would make me happy in the main areas of my life? And those areas are, number one, your career, because that's where you get your self-identity. Your top social value would be number two, your romantic partner. And these following are in no particular order, but then family and friends, that's another category to nurture your best relationships. And you don't need a million friends. You just want one or two or maybe a handful of good friends that you feel close to and bonded to. And interests, what do you do apart from your career? Like we were just talking about dance for me anyway, and for you. Dance or other hobbies or interests or art that you might enjoy. And those are the key areas of your life. So if you know to look at those areas, which again would be career, romantic partner, family and friends, and you only need family who are friends. You can keep boundaries between those who are not too friendly. And you want to be very selective with family. And your hobbies and interests. And if you know to focus on those, and then you focus on, you're being rational, you're looking, rational doesn't mean no emotions. It means, rational means you understand what leads to those delicious emotions in your life of happiness, joy, pride, and earned pride, a celebration of your own life.
Beautiful. So what are some of the kinds of things that people that are listening now could do to help them? Let's say they do some introspection based on listening to this now, and they realize that they haven't really pursued their own happiness, their own rational happiness in one or two or more of those categories you mentioned. What would be really practical next steps that they should take?
Oh, well, the first is that they need first to know that they have the right to their own life, that they can't be thinking, I need to do what my mom wants me with the career that my parents want me to go into, or the career that my friends think I should go into, or I think is good for me, but I don't like. They need to give themselves the liberty to own their own life and have the conviction that they own their own life and that they have the right to grow their own life. Then they want to look at their strengths. I always like to start with strengths. What am I good at? What do I enjoy most? In the areas, what am I good at career-wise? Of course, you want to look at what do I enjoy doing? And you can look across your whole lifespan. What experiences have I had that I said, oh, maybe I'd like to do this when I am older or when I grow up? You can look at, when have I had really good friends? What are the elements of a good friendship that speak to my own character? How have I been able to keep a good friendship? You can look at your hobbies. What do I love in hobbies? So you're planning. But you can't do that if you don't think you own your own life. It will be, how can I volunteer? How can I be selfless? How can I be the good person who wants nothing for myself, don't want to be selfish, I only want to do for others? That is a recipe for disaster.
Yeah. And say a couple more words about this. I agree with you, of course.
So if you feel like you have to either live for others in order to be a moral person, which we pick up either through religion or in a secular world too, I certainly picked it up, that I'm good if I do for others all the time. Then when you start to do something for yourself, you feel like you have to sneak it in, or you feel guilty for doing it, for pursuing your own goals, your own happiness, or buying a ticket to a concert that you might want to hear. You feel selfish, and you never want to look at the world that way. You're not a me only or my way of the highway person if you value yourself. In fact, that is the top, in my philosophy, that is the top value that you have, is to own your own life and to grow your own life, to grow it in areas that bring you a lot of satisfaction. And the first place you start is with your own character. You develop someone my uncle used to say, I'm going to live with one person my whole life, myself. So why not make my own home, meaning his own psychological home, a place that I enjoy living in, meaning being honest with other people, being honest with yourself, having integrity, making your own life interesting. So he loved science. So he was always reading Scientific Americans and pursuing all different goals in his life.
Sounds like a smart man.
Right. You don't want to live for others. And we've taught that living for others is good. That doesn't mean you're not benevolent and kind to the people you love. They are your values, your kids and select family members and friends or a coworker you really like and want to help out. But you don't sacrifice yourself. You don't put yourself in the shadows of your own life. You don't sit in the back of the bus in your own life.
Love it. Great. I 100% agree. So, Ellen, real quick, what's new and exciting on your horizon these days?
Dr. Ed Locke and I are starting on a new project. We're going to be writing a book on happiness.
You mentioned that. It's amazing. So what's one specific action that listeners can take this week, today even, to upgrade their own happiness?
Well, if they're thinking of their career, I love focusing on the positives because positives are much better motivators than negatives.
True.
So what do they enjoy in their career? To name what it is specifically. Is it the camaraderie with people, the teamwork? Is it that they see their own skills being challenged and stretched and where they're growing themselves and they see their own skills being used well and they feel efficacious? You know, what is it that they love about what they do? And then they can broaden that out. What else do they love about their own life in the other areas we talked about? So focusing on the good. And when they find something that's not working well, my suggestion, if I could give them one tip there, one actionable tip, is that whenever I find myself doing something that I think is, say, I'm wasting time, instead of beating up on myself saying, there I go again, I'm wasting time, I say, good noticing, Ellen. It's just gentle. Good noticing, because I'm not beating up on myself and I'm less likely to waste time. I'm more likely to use my time more effectively. So when they find something, if they say yell at their child and they're upset that they yelled at their child, well, they definitely want to make amends and know what to do differently. But first they want to commend themselves on the courage to face something they did wrong and want to repair or to fix. And so it's just good noticing. I'm glad I noticed that I did that, and I'm honest with myself.
Yes. Oh, good. I love that. So be more kind and loving to yourself and don't spend so much time beating yourself up.
Because you're more likely to improve.
Well, exactly. Yeah. I love that it's not just noticing. You do need to take action, but you have more time to move towards action if you don't wallow.
Right, exactly.
Perfect. So I know people are going to want to stay in touch with you, learn more about you. I know that you have, for example, the first chapter of the book with Dr. Locke available for free on your website. So what's the best place for people to go to see all of that?
Yeah, the website is drkenner.com, DRKENNER, no periods after the doctor.com. And again, drkenner.com. And they can also go to Amazon. They can get the book on Amazon. The first chapter is free at the website, but on Amazon they can get the book. It's called The Selfish Path to Romance, How to Love with Passion and Reason. And Dr. Ed Locke and I co-authored the book. And when we use the word selfish there, it's what I've been talking about. It doesn't mean the mean, rotten, my way or the highway, narcissistic way to romance. It means the self-valuing, self-nurturing, self-esteem way to romance for both partners. And then they're much more likely to cherish each other.
Yes, and I know that you focus in there on generosity and caring for others and so forth.
And benevolence, right?
Yes. Yeah, good. Well, of course, and that's such an important distinction. We mentioned a little bit about this package deal we have about selfishness when I talked to Dr. Orma. That was on episode 99. If you're interested, listen to that. And we will link to your website on the show notes and, of course, to your book. So I hope and encourage talent growers. I encourage you to go check those out. And I know you also have Twitter. You're active on Twitter and Facebook, right?
Facebook, yep. Yes, on both.
Well, I'm glad that you came on today. I'm sorry the time is up, and I enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you, Halelly.
My pleasure. Well, there you have it. Another episode of the Talent Grow Show is a wrap. What did you think, talent growers? Did you get some insight here about your own happiness, your own career, your own life that you can use to ensure your happiness. I hope that you take action. Your one life that you have is precious, and I do want you to make the most of it. And so I'd love to hear your feedback, and I really, really want to hear about what you thought and what you did. So let me know. You can always go into the show notes page and drop me a comment there. You can share on social media, or you can leave me a voicemail, which is that little black tab on the right side of the page on my website from any device. It's so easy to leave me a voice message. And of course, if you give me permission, I can even use your message. If it's of good enough quality, I can use it on a future episode of the Talent Grow Show. Wouldn't that be fun? All right. Well, thank you for tuning in. I'm Halelly Azulay, your leadership development strategist here at Talent Grow. And this has been the Talent Grow Show. I thank you for listening, and I hope that you make today great.
Thanks for listening to the Talent Grow Show, where we help you develop your talent to become the kind of leader that people want to follow. For more information, visit talentgrow.com.